Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into Forbes' greatest business stories of all time today.
Oh, this is a good one. 20 stories about entrepreneurs. They really built empires, but also they shaped how we live and work today. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so it's not just like a dry business book, right?
No, not at all. It's about ambition, risk, resilience. You'll see how these folks navigated uncharted waters, faced incredible obstacles, and, ultimately left their mark on American history. It's really fascinating.
I'm ready to jump in. Where do we start?
How about a name you might not recognize? Robert Morris. He's sometimes called America's first financier.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did he do?
So imagine this. A flour tycoon uses his personal wealth to finance the American Revolution.
Wait, hold on. He bankrolled the revolution with his own money. Wow, that's dedication.
It was a crazy time back then, financially speaking.
Yeah.
The newly formed nation, they didn't even have a stable currency. Forget about credit. So Morris stepped in, created financial systems basically from scratch.
He was more than just a rich guy writing checks then. He was like a financial architect for a brand new country.
Exactly. He even teamed up with Haym Salomon, a Jewish financier, to get loans from France and Holland. Those were crucial, for the war effort.
Talk about high stakes. Did it work?
At first, yeah, it was a success. His risk paid off. Morris's efforts helped secure the funding that led to victory for America. But his story, well, takes a turn. Fortune can be fickle, right?
Oh, I bet there's a but coming. It's not all sunshine and roses, is it?
No, it's not. After the war, Morris, always the risk taker, got caught up in land speculation. Kind of like a 18th century real estate bubble. People were buying and selling land like crazy, hoping to get rich.
Sounds familiar. We've seen how risky investments can backfire, even today.
And that's what happened. This time, his gamble didn't pay off. He ended up in debtor's prison and died in obscurity.
Wow. Talk about a rise and fall. It's a good reminder that even the most successful people, they're still human. Okay, so from a financial trailblazer, something completely different, let's talk about Cyrus McCormick and his Reaper.
Ah, yes. Before we get into McCormick, imagine farming before his invention. Backbreaking labor.
Yeah.
Harvesting wheat, it took forever, and it was incredibly physically demanding.
I can't imagine. We're so spoiled with modern technology today in farming. It's hard to picture how tough it was.
Right. And then comes McCormick's Reaper, a marvel of engineering. Gears, blades cutting and gathering wheat with speed and efficiency nobody had ever seen before. But, it didn't win everyone over immediately.
Really? Why not? It sounds like a dream for a farmer.
You'd think so, right? Many farmers were skeptical at first. They were used to their old ways. Plus, the Reaper was a big investment.
So how did McCormick change their minds?
He was smart, not just an inventor, but a marketer, too. Got patents for his invention, then he hit the road, showcased the Reaper at fairs, demonstrated its efficiency, how much labor and cost it saved.
Show, don't tell.
Uh-huh.
That's a classic sales tactic. But didn't the book say there were family problems as the business grew?
Yeah, that's where things get complicated. Success, especially in family businesses, often brings its own set of problems. As McCormick's company got bigger, tensions rose among family members. Brothers arguing, even Cyrus Jr. clashed with his dad about the company's direction.
Classic tale. Family, ambition, and keeping it all together while things are booming. It's tough.
It is. The Reaper, it changed farming forever. But it also showed the human side of things, the messiness of family dynamics, the struggle between ambition and relationships.
Makes you think. Okay, from revolutionizing farms to, oil. Let's talk John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil.
Rockefeller. That's a story about ambition, strategy, and efficiency taken to the extreme. He got into the oil industry when it was just starting to boom, saw the potential for wealth, influence, but he also saw chaos. A fragmented industry that was ripe for the taking.
I've heard he was pretty ruthless. What was his style?
Control. He wanted to control the entire process. Drilling, refining, distribution. Started by buying up refineries. Figured out that was the bottleneck. By controlling them, he could dictate terms to producers and retailers, basically squeezed out the competition.
Aggressive. Did anyone try to stop him?
Oh, yeah. Criticism, legal challenges. People called him out for creating a monopoly. Said he used unfair tactics to crush his rivals. But Rockefeller, he knew how to play the game. Legally, politically, he always seemed one step ahead.
So, a brilliant businessman, but also a controversial figure. Didn't the government eventually step in?
They did. 1911, the Supreme Court said Standard Oil was a monopoly, ordered it broken up. It was a landmark decision, a real turning point in how we think about corporate power.
Wow. Rockefeller's story, it's the American dream, but kind of a dark side too, He built this incredible fortune, but his methods raise questions about fairness and what role the government should play in business. Okay, let's switch gears again. From oil to a full-blown financial crisis. The Panic of 1907. This sounds intense.
It was a wild time. So much uncertainty in the markets. Back then, the U.S. didn't have a central bank. The economy was vulnerable. One shock and panic.
No safety net.
Hmm.
Yikes. What caused this particular panic?
It all started with the Knickerbocker Trust, a big financial institution in New York City. It collapsed. And the news spread like wildfire, triggering bank runs all across the country. People were terrified, rushing to get their money out, thinking they'd lose everything.
I can just imagine the chaos. So who stepped in? Who stopped the bleeding?
That's where J.P. Morgan comes in, the most powerful financier of his era. He became like a one-man central bank, used his own wealth, his influence, to put together a private bailout.
Wow. Did it work? What did he do?
He got other bankers to pool their resources. They provided cash to struggling institutions. He even got President Theodore Roosevelt to agree to a move that helped stabilize things. It was controversial, but it worked.
One man, a whole lot of influence, and a bunch of anxious bankers in his library. That's how they saved the day.
Well, it wasn't just him, of course, but Morgan's leadership, it was critical. The whole thing showed the flaws in the system, though, and that paved the way for the Federal Reserve a few years later.
So a crisis can sometimes lead to positive changes. It's fascinating to see how these things are connected. Okay, from high finance to something more, well, down to earth. Henry Ford and the Model T.
Ford, he wasn't just building cars. He was changing transportation, American society. His vision was a car for everyone. Affordable, accessible, not just for the wealthy.
The assembly line. He revolutionized manufacturing with that. But what was so special about the Model T itself?
Simple, reliable, easy to fix. Ford famously said, any customer can have a car painted any color that he wants so long as it is black. Standardization. That was key to keeping costs down. He wasn't about luxury. He wanted a practical car, something that could handle rural America.
And it was a hit, obviously. The Model T, a true American icon. It really fueled the rise of car culture. Didn't he double his workers' wages, though? That doesn't sound like the typical cost-cutting, efficiency-obsessed CEO.
That's the interesting part about Ford. He understood that happy, well-paid workers are more productive. Reduced turnover, better morale, more skilled workforce. It was a radical idea, but it worked out for the company and the workers.
So sometimes investing in your people pays off just as much as investing in technology or marketing.
Well,
But was there a downside to all of Ford's success?
there was. He was so focused on the Model T. As times changed, tastes changed, competitors came out with more stylish, comfortable cars. But Ford, he held on to the Model T for too long, resisted change, thought it was the perfect car for everyone.
So his strength, his vision, also became his weakness. It's a reminder to adapt, to listen to customers, even when you're on top. All right, from cars to finance again, this time Charles Merrill, bringing Wall Street to Main Street. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's about making investing available to everyone, not just the wealthy elite. Back then, investing, it was seen as risky, exclusive. Merrill wanted to change that.
He was kind of a rebel, going against the Wall Street grain. What was his approach?
He founded Merrill Lynch with this radical idea, Wall Street for everyone. He built branch offices all across the country, like a chain of investment stores. Believed in educating the public, making it easier for ordinary folks to buy stocks and bonds.
So a completely different image than the stuffy, exclusive Wall Street stereotype.
Exactly. He saw a huge potential market of everyday investors, and his timing was perfect. The post-war economic boom, people had more money, and they were interested in investing.
It's amazing how these individual stories tie into bigger historical trends. Merrill's vision, it created a new generation of investors, helped build a shareholder society.
And it's a reminder that any industry can be disrupted. Finance seemed pretty stuck in its ways, but Merrill, he shook things up, made something exclusive accessible to all.
From stocks and bonds to something a little more fun, let's talk about David Sarnoff and the rise of broadcasting.
Sarnoff, he's all about vision and understanding how media can connect people. He saw radio's potential as a mass medium long before most folks.
He was there at the very beginning. Didn't he even predict radio's success way back when?
Yep. Started as a young telegraph operator and rose through the ranks at Marconi Wireless, which later became RCA. And in 1916, he wrote this memo, described a radio music box in every home, bringing news, music, entertainment to everyone.
That's amazing. Radio was barely a thing back then. Did his vision come true?
Oh, it did, big time. Sarnoff shaped RCA's strategy, pushed them to invest in broadcasting tech and programming. He knew radio wasn't just about transmitting info, it was about shared experience, connecting people across huge distances.
So he wasn't just a techie, he was a storyteller, a visionary. But what about television? Did he see that coming too?
He did. Sarnoff was a big believer in television early on, drove RCA's research even during the Depression. He was convinced that television would be even bigger than radio, moving pictures and sound right in your living room.
And he was right again. He even introduced TV to the world at the 1939 World's Fair.
It was a landmark event. RCA showed off their latest TV technology, and Sarnoff gave a speech. He said it was the beginning of a new era in communication, and he was spot on.
Think about it. From those fuzzy black and white pictures to the amazing HD streaming world we have now, it all started with Sarnoff's vision.
He wasn't just a businessman or a tech guy. He was a cultural force, changed how we consume info and entertainment, connected us in ways people couldn't have imagined before.
Speaking of entertainment, let's talk about Walt Disney. That name's synonymous with family entertainment, a whole empire built on it.
Disney's story, it's about creativity, imagination, and pure determination. Started as a struggling animator, faced rejection, but never gave up on his dream.
Everyone knows Mickey Mouse, but how did he come to be?
Disney's early success was with a character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, but he lost the rights to it because of a contract issue. Devastating. But, determined to create something even better, he came up with Mickey Mouse.
One setback leading to a defining moment. It's incredible, Mickey Mouse. He's more than just a cartoon. He's an icon. Joy, imagination, American culture.
Exactly. And Disney, he was more than just a creator of cute characters. He was a master storyteller, a pioneer in animation techniques. He understood animation wasn't just moving drawings, it was about bringing emotions to life, creating worlds that everyone could connect with.
The book talked about Technicolor. How did that change things?
Color, it revolutionized animation, brought a new dimension of vibrancy and realism to Disney's films. Snow White, the first full-length animated feature in Technicolor, it was a massive success.
It must have been magical seeing those characters in color on the big screen.
Game changer. Artistically and commercially, it started a new era for animation and made Disney the leader in the industry. But he had even bigger dreams. He wanted to build a place where families could step into his worlds, a place for imagination to run wild.
Disney.
Exactly. Risky, expensive, but he made it happen. Disneyland was a way to bring his stories and characters to life in a whole new way, an immersive experience, a world of wonder and enchantment.
From a struggling animator to an entertainment mogul, Disney's story is inspiring. Okay, let's move on to a story that's both inspiring and deeply connected to American society. John H. Johnson and the Ebony Empire.
This one, it's about entrepreneurship and social change. Johnson saw a gap in the media. There weren't many positive portrayals of African Americans. He knew how powerful media was in shaping perceptions, so he decided to create something to celebrate Black achievement, culture, and history.
He started with a magazine called Negro Digest, right? What was so groundbreaking about it?
At the time, mainstream media pretty much ignored or misrepresented Black experiences. Negro Digest gave Black voices a platform. It showed off Black accomplishments, challenged racist stereotypes, and created a sense of pride and community.
So not just a business, but a movement, a platform for change.
Exactly. He then created Ebony and Jet magazines. Both became incredibly successful, influential. They offered an alternative to the typical narratives about Black Americans, shaped Black identity, challenged the status quo.
A true visionary, recognizing the needs of a community and using media to drive change.
Sure.
But attracting advertisers, I imagine that was a challenge.
It was. Many advertisers were hesitant to support publications aimed at Black audiences. Johnson had to work hard to convince them of the buying power of the Black consumer market.
Even the best ventures face resistance. Breaking down barriers takes persistence, creativity, and challenging the norm.
Absolutely. Johnson's story shows the entrepreneurial spirit, the importance of representation, and using your platform to advocate for change.
Okay, from publishing to the world of advertising. David Ogilvy. What made him stand out in such a creative, competitive industry?
Ogilvy, they call him the father of modern advertising. His story is a mix of creativity, strategy, and understanding human psychology. He believed advertising should be more than just slogans or jingles. It should tell stories, build a brand's image, and connect with people emotionally.
So, a master persuader. What were some of his main ideas?
Ogilvy believed in research, used data and insights to understand consumers. He was meticulous, crafted ad copy and visuals that were creative and effective. He wanted to get people to act.
Didn't he have a famous quote about respecting consumers?
He said, "The consumer isn't a moron, she is your wife." Basically saying consumers are smart and you have to treat them with respect. Be authentic.
I like that, especially in an industry often accused of manipulation and gimmicks.
Ogilvy was different. And it worked. He founded his own agency, Ogilvy and Mather, which became one of the most respected in the world.
One man's vision changing an entire industry. He brought sophistication and strategic thinking to advertising, showed that creativity and data could work together. Okay, let's talk about another American icon, McDonald's. How did they get so big?
Ray Kroc. He saw a small burger joint and imagined a global empire. His story is all about opportunity, building a system, understanding consistency and efficiency.
He didn't start McDonald's, though, did he?
No, the McDonald brothers had a successful place in California, but they were happy with it. Kroc saw something bigger, franchising, creating a chain with the same experience everywhere you went.
He was obsessed with consistency, wasn't he? Had a whole set of rules for every restaurant.
Absolutely. Kroc believed every McDonald's should be the same. Menu, service, cleanliness, no matter where you were. He created a system to make sure it happened. No detail was too small.
That's a big part of their success, isn't it? You know what to expect at McDonald's anywhere in the world.
Exactly. Kroc's focus on standardization and smart use of franchising, that's how McDonald's grew so fast. Across the U.S., then the world.
The book mentioned he used real estate, too.
He was clever. Realized that owning the land where the restaurants were built, that gave him leverage and a steady income. He didn't just sell franchises, he bought the land and leased it back to the franchisees. A win-win. He got a reliable income and they got a great location.
Wow, that's smart. It's more than just burgers and fries, it's a real estate empire, too. Okay, from fast food to fast copies. Joseph Wilson and the Xerox 914.
This one's about seeing potential that others missed. Back in the 50s, copying tech was clunky and expensive. Wilson, he ran a small company called Haloid. He saw xerography, a pretty obscure technology at the time, and he bet everything on it.
That was a big gamble. Did the book say bigger companies had rejected the tech? Why was Wilson so convinced?
He saw the future. Faster, easier, cheaper copying. The Xerox 914, named after the paper size, he thought it would revolutionize how we shared information.
And he was right. A simple invention changed how we work and communicate.
The Xerox 914, it became a must-have in every office. And the company's name, well, it became the word for copying itself. That's the power of vision, persistence, and taking a chance on something new.
This has been an incredible journey already. Revolutionaries, inventors, financiers, people who shaped American business and left a lasting impact on our lives. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into Forbes' greatest business stories of all time. Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into Forbes' greatest business stories of all time. So many fascinating stories. Where do we go next?
Let's switch gears a bit. From copiers to credit cards. The story of American Express. You know, it's a company that started out doing something completely different but ended up a giant in financial services.
Oh, that's interesting. I know American Express for their cards and traveler's checks, but I didn't realize they had such a long history. What were their early days like?
Well, way back in 1850, they were an express delivery service, transporting stuff all over the country. Valuables, goods, you name it. This was when railroads were expanding like crazy, so there was a real need for reliable and safe transportation.
So like the FedEx or UPS of their time, hauling packages instead of credit card bills.
Exactly. They built a reputation for being trustworthy, reliable, handled everything. Packages, important documents, the works. But it wasn't until a few decades later that they got into financial services. Traveler's checks, that was their first big move.
Traveler's checks. I remember those. Before debit cards were everywhere, what was the idea behind them?
Think about traveling back then, especially internationally. It was risky, inconvenient. Carrying lots of cash was dangerous. Exchanging currency was a pain. American Express saw a way to make it safer, easier.
So traveler's checks, it was a way to protect yourself from theft and make it easier to manage your money while traveling. That's pretty smart. But how did they go from traveler's checks to credit cards?
It wasn't a sudden shift. At first, they weren't so keen on charge cards, worried about the risks of giving credit to people. But then, competitors like Diners Club started gaining ground with their charge cards. American Express realized they had to get in the game.
Competition, driving innovation. Classic story. So they finally embraced the credit card. But they did it in a very specific way, didn't they?
They did. They didn't try to appeal to everyone. They targeted a specific group, upscale business travelers. The American Express card, it was a symbol of prestige, exclusivity, perks and benefits that catered to those folks.
It's fascinating how they turned a financial product into a status symbol. It's not just about convenience, it's about image, belonging to a certain club.
You got it. They understood their market. They didn't just sell a card, they sold a membership. Exclusive airport lounges, concierge services, rewards programs, all those things appealed to wealthy travelers.
Even in finance, branding and marketing can make a huge difference. Okay, let's go from luxury travel to a company that really focused on empowering women. Mary Kay Ash and her cosmetics empire.
Mary Kay Ash, she was a trailblazer, broke glass ceilings, created a company that really challenged the traditional corporate world. She started Mary Kay Cosmetics in 1963. Back then, women faced a lot of barriers in the workplace. She wanted to create a company that gave women opportunities, a supportive environment where they could thrive.
I've heard she used a direct sales model. Women could build their own businesses, selling directly to customers. Was that a common thing back then?
Not as common as it is now, but it gave women flexibility, control over their time. They could balance work and family. It appealed to women who wanted to be their own boss, build something for themselves.
It's a model that's still popular today. Lots of women looking for entrepreneurial opportunities. But Mary Kay Cosmetics was known for its culture too, right?
Oh, yeah. Ash, she believed in empowering women, recognizing their achievements, creating this supportive, almost family-like environment. Positive reinforcement, motivation, personal growth. That was important to her.
And then there are the pink Cadillacs. You can't talk about Mary Kay without mentioning those. What's the story there?
Those pink Cadillacs, they were the ultimate symbol of success. The top salespeople, they got to drive these iconic cars. A very visible reward for their achievements.
Brilliant marketing, really. Motivates the workforce, gets people talking. It's not just selling lipstick. It's about creating a whole culture of success and recognition.
Exactly. Ash understood the power of symbols, rewards. It helped build a strong brand identity.
Okay, let's switch gears again. From cosmetics to microchips. Intel, a company that was at the heart of the personal computer revolution. How did they become such a powerhouse?
I'll admit, I know silicon chips are important for computers and everything else, but I don't really know how they're made or how Intel came to be.
It all started in Silicon Valley. A group of brilliant scientists and engineers. They were really pushing the limits of what was possible with semiconductors. There was a company called Fairchild Semiconductor, one of the first in the industry, back in the late 50s. Robert Noyce, one of the founders, he co-invented the integrated circuit, the silicon chip.
Wow, so they were pioneers in a field that would change everything. Oh, absolutely. This invention revolutionized electronics. Smaller, faster, more powerful devices, it all became possible.
So where does Intel fit into all of this?
Well, Noyce, along with Gordon Moore and Andy Grove, they saw that these integrated circuits could be used to create even more powerful and innovative products. So they left Fairchild and started Intel, dedicated to pushing semiconductor technology even further.
I've heard of Moore's Law. Is that part of this story?
It is. Gordon Moore, he observed that the number of transistors you could fit on a chip was doubling about every 2 years. Exponential growth. That's Moore's Law. And it's been driving technological progress for decades.
It's mind-blowing how fast technology has advanced. New gadgets all the time. What were some of Intel's big innovations?
The microprocessor, that was a huge one. A tiny computer on a single chip. This is what made personal computers possible. Paved the way for the PC revolution in the 80s.
So they created the brains of the PC. Wow. That's a game changer.
Absolutely pivotal. And their partnership with IBM was crucial. Intel supplied the microprocessor for the IBM PC, which became the industry standard.
So from tiny chips to a tech giant, Intel's story is about innovation and always pushing forward. It shows how even the smallest inventions can have a huge impact. Okay, let's move on to a company known for low prices and massive selection. Walmart. How did they become so dominant in retail?
Walmart, that's a classic American story. Entrepreneurship, hard work, understanding what customers want. Sam Walton, the founder, started small, a Ben Franklin franchise in Arkansas in the 40s. His philosophy, simple. Lots of products at the lowest possible prices, appeal to everyone.
And it worked. Walmart's a household name now. Huge stores, low prices, endless aisles of stuff. But how did Walton create something so big and efficient?
Logistics, supply chain management. He was a master, built this incredible system to move goods quickly and cheaply from suppliers to stores, keep costs down, pass the savings on to customers.
So it wasn't just about finding cheap products. It was about creating a system to get those products to people at the lowest possible cost.
Exactly. Walton was all about efficiency, but he also believed in his employees, encouraged them to take ownership, to come up with ideas.
I've heard he was very hands-on, visiting stores, talking to employees and customers.
Oh, yeah. He wanted to stay connected, to see what was working, what could be improved. He led by example. His dedication, his work ethic, it inspired people.
It's interesting how some of these entrepreneurs, even when they're running huge companies, they stay connected to the people.
It shows their passion, their belief in people. They understand that their businesses are ultimately about serving customers, creating value for them. Okay, let's talk about a company that took on a giant, William McGowan and MCI. They challenged AT&T's monopoly in telecom. That's a David versus Goliath story, if I ever heard one.
MCI, the long-distance company.
Wow.
Back in the day, before cell phones and the internet changed everything. What made their story so interesting?
Imagine AT&T was the only option for long-distance calls. They controlled everything. The lines, the rates, the whole shebang. It seemed like they'd be on top forever.
So McGowan was really going up against a giant. You have to admire the guts it took to do that. What was his strategy? How could he possibly compete with a company like AT&T?
McGowan saw a way to offer long-distance service at much lower prices. Technology was changing, and he believed he could build a better, more efficient network. Undercut AT&T, give people a real choice.
That's incredible. One person with a vision challenging a whole industry. Did McGowan have a background in telecom, or was he coming in from a different world?
He was a venture capitalist, actually. He knew how to spot opportunities, how to build businesses. He saw the potential in telecom, and he was willing to take a big risk.
Taking on AT&T, though, that had to be tough. They had everything: resources, infrastructure, political connections. How did he overcome those hurdles?
It was a long, hard fight. Years of legal battles, regulatory roadblocks. AT&T fought back hard. They used their power to try to crush MCI, lobbying, lawsuits, even tried to cut off their funding.
It sounds like a classic underdog story. MCI fighting for survival against a giant.
It was. But McGowan, he never gave up. He believed in his vision. He was creative, resourceful, and a real fighter. And he had a great team: engineers, lawyers, business people who were just as passionate as he was.
A fighter, an innovator, and a strategist. So what finally turned things around for MCI? How did they break through?
A few things came together. Technology was improving. You could build more efficient and cheaper networks. And the regulators, they were starting to favor more competition in the industry. The FCC, they were more open to new companies coming in. They saw that monopolies weren't good for innovation or for consumers.
So McGowan was riding a wave of change, but he was also pushing for that change to happen.
Exactly. He was a catalyst, but the timing was right. People wanted more choices, lower prices, better service. The old way wasn't working anymore. It was time for disruption.
It's a good reminder that even the biggest companies can be challenged. Innovation and competition are good for everyone. What was the impact of MCI's success?
Well, it changed the telecommunications industry. AT&T's control over long distance was broken. Prices went down, there were more choices, and innovation exploded. This helped the internet grow, the digital economy. It all benefited consumers in the end.
An inspiring story. A visionary leader who challenged the status quo, fought hard, and helped create a better future.
It shows the power of entrepreneurship, the importance of competition, and how one person can change a whole industry. Okay, one last story for this part of our deep dive. A company that's become a household name, Harley-Davidson. Their journey, it's about more than just motorcycles. It's about American craftsmanship, a sense of freedom, and a brand that's become a symbol of a certain lifestyle. But they had their tough times too. Back in the 70s and early 80s, they were in real trouble. Competition from Japan, quality issues, the whole works.
It's hard to imagine seeing how successful they are now. How did they get into such a bad situation?
Well, Japanese companies like Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, they came into the U.S. market strong. Their bikes were often better, more reliable, fuel efficient, and cheaper.
The classic disruption story. New competitors with better products shaking up the industry.
Exactly. And Harley-Davidson was slow to react. They had internal problems too. Quality control, unhappy workers, and management that didn't seem to understand what was happening.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So what saved them? How did they turn things around?
A group of executives who really believed in Harley-Davidson, they did a leveraged buyout. They knew they had to make big changes to survive.
So people who really love the brand came in to rescue it.
Yeah, they were true believers. They knew they had to improve quality, be more efficient, and reconnect with their customers. And they were willing to learn from the competition.
The book mentioned they actually adopted some Japanese manufacturing techniques. That's pretty ironic considering they were competing with those same companies.
It is. They realized the Japanese were doing some things really well. Quality control, lean manufacturing, getting employees involved. They weren't too proud to learn from their rivals.
So they were humble, open to new ideas. What else did they do?
They lobbied the government to put temporary tariffs on imported motorcycles. That gave them some breathing room to make changes without being overwhelmed by the cheaper Japanese bikes.
That's a controversial move, but it sounds like it bought them some time. Did it work?
It did. It gave them a chance to improve quality, become more efficient, and rebuild their brand. They also focused on their core customers, the motorcycle enthusiasts, the folks who loved the Harley-Davidson image, the sound, the feeling of freedom and rebellion.
It's a great comeback story. Shows how even companies that seem to be on the verge of collapse can reinvent themselves.
It shows the power of believing in a brand, the importance of a dedicated team, and the resilience of American craftsmanship. Okay, let's dive into the world of high finance. Kohlberg, Kravis Roberts, or KKR, they were masters of the leveraged buyout. It's a world that can be pretty confusing. What are leveraged buyouts and what made KKR so successful at it?
Leveraged buyouts. I've heard the term, but I'm not really sure how they work. It sounds risky.
They are risky. Basically, you're buying a company using borrowed money. High risk, but potentially high reward.
Okay, but where does all that money come from?
You use the assets of the company you're buying as collateral to get the loans. And investors, including the buyout firm itself, they put up some equity. The idea is to use the company's own cash flow to pay off the debt and make a profit for the investors.
So you're using the company's own resources to buy it. That's a bold move.
It is, but it can be very profitable, especially if the company has a lot of cash flow, undervalued assets, or if you think you can improve its management. The buyout firm comes in, streamlines things, cuts costs, boosts profits. That's how they make money for themselves and their investors.
KKR was involved in some of the biggest buyouts of the 80s. Yeah, some pretty controversial ones, too.
Oh, yeah. They were behind some of the most famous LBOs, like the takeover of RJR Nabisco. That was a huge deal, chronicled in the book Barbarians at the Gate. Multiple bidders fighting for control, millions of dollars at stake. It really captured the spirit of the 80s.
I've heard of that book. It gave people a glimpse into this whole world of high finance.
It did. Corporate takeovers, the personalities, the strategies, the huge amounts of money involved. It was a fascinating story.
KKR's story shows how finance is always changing. New strategies, new techniques, constantly reshaping the corporate world.
It's a world of big wins and big losses. Innovation and risk-taking are rewarded, but there can be consequences too. All right, our last story for this part is about a company everyone knows, Microsoft. Bill Gates, from a computer enthusiast to the leader of a tech empire. That's a classic American dream story.
They were pioneers in personal computing, weren't they? Back when computers were these huge, expensive machines.
They were. Gates, he imagined a world with computers everywhere, on every desk, in every home, a tool for everyone. He knew software was the key, and he wanted Microsoft to be the biggest software company in the world.
And their big break was MS-DOS, right? The operating system for the IBM PC.
Exactly. IBM needed an operating system for their new PC, and they chose Microsoft. It was a turning point for both companies. And it put Microsoft right at the center of the PC revolution.
It's amazing how Microsoft, a relatively small company, managed to get that deal with IBM. What was Gates' secret?
He was incredibly smart, a great programmer, a tough negotiator, and a visionary leader. He knew how to build partnerships, make strategic alliances, and he wasn't afraid to take risks. He believed in the future of personal computing.
So they rode the PC wave to success, became the leader in operating systems, but they didn't stop there. What else did they do?
They got into application software, Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. These programs became essential for businesses and people everywhere. And then the internet. They developed Internet Explorer, other online services.
They'd always seem to be one step ahead, anticipating the next big thing.
Gates was focused on growth, innovation, always looking for new opportunities, new markets to conquer. He wanted Microsoft to be everywhere.
But it wasn't always smooth sailing. They had their share of controversy, antitrust lawsuits, accusations of being too powerful.
That's right. As they got bigger, people started to worry about their dominance. Were they using their power to stifle competition? Bundling their software together to keep rivals out? It was a big debate.
So they were both praised for their innovation and criticized for their business practices.
Yeah, their story's complicated. It shows how success in the tech world can be both good and bad.
Wow. This second part of our deep dive has been incredible. Credit cards, empowering women, the birth of Silicon Valley, a classic American brand's comeback, the world of high finance, and the rise of a software giant. What other amazing stories are waiting for us in the final part of our journey? Welcome back, everyone. It's the final part of our deep dive into Forbes' greatest business stories of all time. We've covered so much ground already. What incredible story are we ending with?
Well, we're going back to the world of telecommunications. But this time, it's a company that challenged the giant, MCI, and their founder, William McGowan.
MCI. Yeah, I remember them. The long-distance company. It was the big deal before cell phones and the internet took over. What made their story so special?
You gotta imagine, back then at AT&T, they were the only option for long-distance calls. They had a total monopoly, controlled the lines, the rates, everything. It seemed like no one could touch them.
So McGowan was taking on a behemoth. That's a brave move. What was his plan? How could he possibly compete with a company like AT&T?
McGowan saw a way to offer long-distance service at way lower prices. Technology was getting better, and he knew he could build a more efficient network. He wanted to undercut AT&T, give people a real alternative.
One person with a vision challenging a whole industry. It's pretty amazing. Did McGowan have any experience in telecom, or was he coming in from a different field?
He was actually a venture capitalist, so he knew how to spot good opportunities, how to build a company from the ground up. He saw the potential in telecom and was willing to take a big risk.
But going up against AT&T, that couldn't have been easy. They had all the power, the money, the connections. How did McGowan overcome those obstacles?
It was a long, tough fight. Years of legal battles, fighting with regulators, constant pushback from AT&T. They threw everything they had at MCI, tried to crush them.
A classic David and Goliath situation. MCI, the underdog, taking on the giant.
That's exactly what it was. But McGowan, he was persistent. He really believed in what he was doing. He was creative, found ways around the roadblocks, and he never backed down. And he had a great team, too, people who were just as passionate as he was.
A fighter, a visionary, a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the turning point? How did MCI finally break through?
Well, a few things happened. Technology was advancing, making it possible to build better, cheaper networks. And the government, they were starting to push for more competition in the telecom industry. The FCC, they were more open to new companies coming in. They realized monopolies weren't good for anyone except maybe AT&T.
So McGowan was in the right place at the right time. But he was also pushing for that change to happen.
Yeah, he was a driving force, for sure. But the time was right for change. People wanted more choices, lower prices, better service. The old way of doing things wasn't working anymore.
It's a good reminder that even the biggest, most powerful companies can be challenged. Innovation and competition, they're good for everybody. What was the ultimate impact of MCI's success?
It changed the whole telecommunications industry. AT&T's control over long distance, it was broken, prices came down, people had more options, and there was a ton of innovation. That all led to the growth of the internet, the digital world we live in now. It was a big win for consumers.
It's a great example of how one person with a vision can make a difference.
Absolutely. It shows what entrepreneurship is all about, the importance of competition, and how much impact one person can have on a whole industry.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive. From revolutionaries and inventors to financiers, marketers, and visionaries, people who built incredible businesses and shaped the way we live today.
It's amazing to see how these individual stories are connected to the bigger picture of American business and history.
These stories are inspiring. They remind us that even when things are tough, when you face setbacks, you could achieve incredible things with hard work, creativity, and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
These are lessons for all of us, whether we're starting businesses or just trying to make our mark on the world.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Forbes' greatest business stories of all time. It's been a fascinating journey.
We encourage you to dig deeper into these stories, learn from the successes and failures, and find inspiration to pursue your own dreams.
And as we wrap things up, we'll leave you with this thought. What story will you create?